So the latest film from acclaimed director Harmony Korine is finally here, The Beach Bum, and I kind of loved it.
One day I will swallow up the world. And when I do, I hope you all perish violently.
Now, Harmony Korine is a director that garners a lot of hate and a lot of praise with every release he has. I mean, most recently he did Spring Breakers, which a lot of people really hated and a lot of people really loved, and Gummo and so on. Most of his movies tend to have quite polarizing reactions, as Beach Bum does. It seems a lot of people really dislike this movie, while a lot of people, like me I guess, really enjoy it. Now, with Harmony Korine, you kind of know what you're getting into if you've seen any of his movies. They're very strange, he has a very unique voice, but oftentimes I find myself not having much of a reaction to his movies. I find myself just kind of watching them passively, but The Beach Bum kind of changed that for me, and I'll get into that a little bit later, but to start off, we'll talk about some things I didn't quite love about this movie, even though there is very little. The biggest one for me was the music choices. I think a lot of the music outside of the actual songs, the classic songs that are played, are not that great. I think a lot of the compositions are kind of royalty-free sounding. And not just the music, but the editing also I found to be kind of awkward and jarring. There are a lot of times when the editing just kind of cuts around a conversation, but the conversation seems to bounce around locations for some strange reason. I don't quite know why that it was done this way, but throughout the movie, frequently people will be having a conversation and it will cut to the next sentence of that conversation and they'll be in a completely different location. Sometimes it'll be a different time of day, sometimes they'll be wearing different clothes, sometimes they'll be driving down the street when they were sitting on a pier. So I'm not so sure why this was the way it was. Maybe it was intentional, maybe it was to show the fractured mindset of our main character, but I kind of don't think so. I mean, he's done this before. He did it in Spring Breakers. He has a very similar style in Spring Breakers that he has here, and I just don't care for that type of editing.
Man, you look like shit.
Yeah, I look like I always look.
You have pissed away your talent on women and booze and...
Now you're talking. That's what feeds the juices up here in my nugget, man. I get all these things going.
For a movie that is so carefree and free-spirited and light-hearted, this movie is very rigidly structured. This movie has a structure that I didn't expect, because the first 30 minutes or so of this movie is basically just Matthew McConaughey going around doing things without much rhyme or reason. He goes and drinks, and then he sleeps with some women, then he goes and drinks some more, then he goes and boats around, and then he goes back to his family, and then his daughter's getting married, and it was like, okay, there's just things happening, it's gonna be a slice of life type of thing for this character. But then it takes a left turn at the end of the first act, and actually becomes a story, which I didn't expect, but I greatly appreciated. It actually got me more invested in what was happening, because after the first act, where you see Matthew McConaughey's lifestyle and you kind of grow accustomed to what he is like, he gets in a horrible car accident with his wife, played by Isla Fisher, and she is killed. And after that, they read her will, and you find out that in order to get his inheritance, his 50% of her wealth, because she is extremely wealthy, he needs to write a novel. He needs to finish the novel he's working on because she is sick of seeing his squandered potential. He's an incredibly good writer, he's a great poet, but he spends all of his time drinking, messing around, and partying. So she wants to force him into writing again, and that is the crux of the story. That is mainly what this movie is about. Matthew McConaughey writing his new novel. But it isn't so rigidly structured to where the carefree vibe of the movie is gone. No, in fact, this movie is basically just a collage of scenes where Matthew McConaughey parties, meets people, parties, meets people, parties, and meets people. It's incredibly repetitive, but the people he meets keep this movie very colorful and entertaining, and that was my favorite part of it. Just seeing this crazy cast of characters that Matthew McConaughey runs into.
It all stops now. The foolishness.
You gotta publish your novel.
And if you mess this up, it's jail time.
Wish me luck. I'm off to write the next great American novel. I may have a gangbang when I get back. I will invite your mother.
Thank you, Mr. Moondog.
And what I really loved about the characters in this movie is that Harmony Korine has written them all to have a very clear, defining trait or feature that is infectious in a way. Almost every single character in this movie is a character. They're not full-bodied, but you understand them, and he gives them at least one very defining, very clear trait that you can kind of latch onto. But I mean, this movie kind of has everything though, not just great characters, great side characters, a carefree attitude, a lighthearted tone, and an infectious, charismatic main character. It has so many weird, random side things that make this movie incredibly entertaining from start to finish. Things like a man with an irrational love of dolphins, a coke-addicted parrot, a Jamaican pilot that's 98% blind, smoking a joint as big as my forearm, Matthew McConaughey wearing a dress to accept a prestigious award, or Snoop Dogg saying he was the R&B thing with a big dang-a-lang. How can you not love that?
I'm trying to uncover my connection with the world.
Just follow me, my friend. Let's go, man.
Is he a good pilot?
Nah, man, you got glaucoma in both his eyes.
What I really respected about this movie is that it never compromises its carefree tone. Even when things get a little dark or a little serious, or the main character does something really horrible, it's always upbeat, it's always entertaining, and it's always very lighthearted. And that's what I really liked about this movie and kind of what I latched onto, because there are so many movies out there like this, or that are like comedies, that are funny until it gets serious, and then when the serious stuff happens, it's completely serious and there's no jokes to be found. But this movie never compromises that. This movie is always lighthearted, even when horrible things are happening. It's lighthearted when Zac Efron smashes an old man with a bottle and steals his wallet. It's lighthearted when Matthew McConaughey burns his boat down. This movie is always about the carefree vibe that it is trying to portray, and I really like that. I really liked that it didn't push me to feel a certain way about its main character or the themes it's presenting. It just presents it and says, here's our observations, take them as you will. And some people, I think, will really dislike that. I think a lot of people will see that as being unfocused or being too obstinate. But I really, really loved this approach. I loved that the movie left me to think about this main character, and it left me to make my own assumptions or feelings about him. And it never really pushes you to think about it either. There are themes it's presenting, and at one point it pretty much outright says them, where Jonah Hill, who's hilarious in the movie, says, you know what's great about being rich? The fact that we can do horrible things to other people and they can't do anything about it. And that's mainly what this movie seems to be about, just classism and how the rich are kind of versing the poor. The rich can do whatever they want and the poor can do nothing about it. And I think that's mainly what this movie is about, because the lifestyle Matthew McConaughey lives in this movie, you kind of have to be rich to live it, despite him being a bum. I mean, he doesn't work. He's always at a bar, drinking, smoking, doing drugs. I mean, that's not a lifestyle that you can be poor and live. It's just not. I mean, there are actual bums that Matthew McConaughey befriends in this movie, and it's very clear that they are not living that lifestyle. When you don't have money, you can't really do much in this world, and that is majorly what this movie seems to be trying to communicate, and I really like that. It doesn't ever push me to feel that way, though. It never pushes me to see this movie as some profound art house movie. It just is, and whatever you get out of it is what you get out of it, and that's, I think, why I like this movie so much. It's so carefree, it's so lighthearted, it has great performances, it has a very charismatic and infectious mood to it. I loved all the main characters, I loved all the side characters, I loved the presentation. I can't say it's well shot, but there are some really legitimately nice shots. And despite the few gripes I had with it, like the awkward editing and the awkward music, it just worked for me. And I can honestly say that I really, really enjoyed it, and I borderline loved it.
Yeah, do it again, do it again.
So I can very easily say that this isn't for everyone, but it definitely is for me, I guess. I really enjoyed it. So if you want to, if that sounds like something that you're into, go check it out. It just came out in some theaters, but it's worth watching, I think. So that's that. I'm gonna go back to having a cold now and drinking some orange juice.